Hello, cartoonists and comic makers. My name is Skine, and goddammit, I'm gonna make a video today. And the reason I'm gonna make a video today is because I got inspired by another YouTube channel. This is an episode of Strip Panel Naked, a channel I've recommended before because it really is excellent. It's run by a dude named Haas, who does, meticulous dissections and analyses of the methods and workings that comics use in order to tell their stories and in order to get their things across. Like, specifically, the stuff that comics can do that other mediums can't. I heartily recommend this channel. There's going to be a link to this video down in the description. I recommend that you go and watch it. But in this video specifically, he's talking about how comics use sound effects, specifically how they're used in this particular comic, Prince of Cats, as kind of a diegetic part of the world. Like, how the sound effects are given a sense of place and personality in the same sense that the characters are, and that's something that you can really only do in comics, is to give the sound personality in people's head. That's something that's quite difficult to do in, for instance, a novel. It's something that's quite difficult to do in a movie because there the sound is the sound, and the reader is not, well, the listener is not really asked to interpret sound in the same way that they are in a comic. And that got me thinking about sound effects in comics, because it's one of the things I'm actually quite interested in. I make comics myself, so it's one of the things that kind of matter to me, and it got me thinking about some of my absolute favorite use of sound effects in a comic I've read in recent times, as well as reflecting back on some of the first time I saw comic effects being used as kind of an interesting part of the world. So let's talk for a little bit about One Punch Man, specifically this scene right here. One of the things I love about One Punch Man in particular is the way that Yusuke Murata, who draws the comic, and his team, just occasionally they'll just take some time off from, doing your ordinary shonen manga comic to just kind of show off. Just literally just brag by drawing stuff and drawing it better and cooler than anybody else has ever done before. Specifically this sequence from, I think it's chapter 17, where Genos and Saitama are out training, and Saitama, of course, is not taking it seriously at all, and Genos, as is his character, is taking it far, far too seriously. Specifically, the way that this scene uses the sound effects. Now, I had to go looking for a scan of the raw file in order to get the original Japanese sound effects as they were originally intended by Murata and his team, because I wanted to get the full effect. That's why there's that Manga Panda logo down in the bottom right. I hate doing it, but really, I couldn't find any other way to get a hold of these particular images. So what's remarkable about, like, the thing that One Punch Man takes most of its visual inspiration from, the thing that Yusuke Murata really draws a lot of his visual inspiration from, is, of course, Dragon Ball. Like, that's kind of the text for shonen manga these days. Like, Naruto is a reaction to Dragon Ball, Bleach was a reaction to Dragon Ball. Like, they all owe something to the legacy of that thing. And take a look at what he's doing with the sound effects here. Because all of these symbols, insofar as I can interpret them, I don't speak Japanese at all, but insofar as I can interpret them, all these symbols basically just mean just big, loud anime fight sound effects. But take a look at what he's actually doing here. The sound effects are casting a shadow on the ground, as though they were a physical thing that is actually present in the world. And similarly, this sound effect here, the actual blast of the blaster going off, is transparent, almost as though it's kind of enveloped inside the energy blast itself, kind of making it much more a part of the action scene. And with the white outline and the way that it's placed on in perspective on the many converging lines of this action shot, gives the sound effect kind of this effect of being a physical presence in the world that is moving alongside the energy blast, which is something that Murata just keeps showing off. You can see it here, the shadows and the way the sound effect follows, but what he does in the next shot is actually just a remarkable bit of cheekiness, really, because he's been doing this for like a couple of panels where the sound effect is literally casting shadows on the ground, and on the ground you can see the shadow of the sound effect is getting distorted by the speed of the action, which first of all helps further sell just the power and the speed of this energy blast, blasting towards Saitama over here. But take a look at what he does in the next panel, and it's so cheeky and it's so fun. You see what he's doing? He's letting the energy blast cast light onto the sound effect, as though it was cardboard cutouts that were just kind of set up alongside the sound effect. The sound, the energy wave is casting light onto the sound effect, which makes perfect sense because the sound effect has been casting shadows this whole time, so he gives it highlights. And that, from a visual perspective, that is just such a cheeky little thing to do because he's breaking the illusion. Usually, the illusion is supposed to be that a cartoonist puts down sound effects, like in the world, as a visual representation of sound, but they're not supposed to be diegetic. Like, they're not supposed to be part of the world that the characters are occupying. Like, it's not supposed to be a physical, readable presence. But what Murata here is doing, he's completely breaking that illusion apart by letting the sound effect be visibly, obviously, plainly as much a part of the world as the energy blast that he's illustrating is. And you can see he kind of continues it over here, where in another little bit of cheekiness, he literally uses speed lines to distort the outline of this sound effect right here, which gives us, as the viewers, the effect that the sounds here are kind of rushing towards us, even as we're following the energy blast in. And it's such a clever way to make the sound part of the action and part of what's happening. And he actually uses that for more than just showing off. Like, this whole sequence is just showing off. Take a look at how this progresses. He practically animates it, right? You can essentially follow it, and that's what I love about One Punch Man, is that sometimes Murata just goes, "I'm the best cartoonist in the entire goddamn world, and I don't care who knows it." And then take a look at what he does here. Like, here's a simple but clever thing. Here we have Genos just rushing towards Saitama at absolutely maximum speed, right? So fast, in fact, that he catches up with his own energy blast. And where he collides with Saitama is here, so that's where the sound effect is. But by the time the sound effect becomes audible, they're moving so fast that they're already, like, here's where the sound effect originates, here's where they are now. So it communicates this idea that he's literally moving faster than sound when he collides with Saitama and takes him along. But there's also something else that Murata is quite clever about. He's quite clever about when he uses sound effects, because it's really easy when you're a cartoonist to overuse them, to use too many, because everything that happens in the world, you kind of get a sense that I want to put a sound on that. I want to tell the reader what that thing sounds like and what that thing sounds like, and this car over here and this fountain over there and these trees with the rustling leaves over there. I want to put sounds on all of them so the reader can really immerse themselves in what the scene is like. Murata, though, does a few clever things. Notice here, no sound effects in sight. This is a snapshot. This is kind of like a slow-mo snapshot of the moment Genos and Saitama are kind of colliding, and Saitama is kind of surprised by the speed and ferocity with which Genos is engaging him. But despite all the lightning and the crackling and the energy blast that's right beside them and the immense speed that they're going at, there's no sound. Nothing. There's no sound effects. There's no anything. There's just this blurred snapshot, almost as though it's taken with a camera that can't quite keep up with the action, in complete and utter silence. And he does this multiple times. You can see here instantly in the next panel, the sound effects come back, and he's doing that blurring thing that he's doing with them again, using the sound effects essentially to follow the action. That's another thing that's quite clever about what he does in this particular scene, is that he gives us this sense that the sound effects are kind of following this blast of sound that's running along. So it's like the blast is generating noise as it moves along, like all the way down, rather than being one single sound that's dominating the scene. It's this continuous rumble of a thing that's fast approaching its target. And you can see he does it again here, using it to kind of follow, to give direction to the sound, to tell you what direction is the sound going in, what this direction is the sound coming in. And it also helps give direction to the action. It helps us follow where things are happening and where they're going. And once again, you can see here he's just showing off by essentially animating the thing frame by frame. And lots of sound effects are going on here. Bang, boom, pow, wow, all of that nonsense, as Genos is essentially punching the cliff, trying to hit Saitama. But then here's the moment when he begins to realize he's not actually hitting anything, that there's no one there. And despite, like, the scene is still, you can see here, lots of sound effects going on, explosions, everything, because this is a noisy scene. There's rocks flying everywhere, and it's incredibly noisy. But the moment he starts to realize that, oh, wait, hang on, all the sound effects disappear. And what we get is this kind of sense of a moment of silence, almost as though if you were in a movie and all of a sudden the footage kind of slows down, like it goes And then you get this moment of complete silence as we close in on a character and we kind of see how they're feeling and what's going on. Like in The Matrix, when you have that moment when Neo finally realizes that he can actually dodge the agents at the end of the movie when he realizes he's the one, that kind of thing. And so Murata is kind of manipulating our expectations in a cinematic way by giving us moments like in a movie where you have the loud noise and the action, and the explosions, and then moments of quiet when characters need to interact or self-reflect or realize something, where it goes quiet, completely quiet, and it lends a completely different energy to the scene when the sound effects are all of a sudden gone. Like, in this moment, rocks must still be falling, like all kinds of shit must still be happening because he fired that giant-ass energy blast and he's been punching rocks for like the past second and a half. But it's not until, boom, time resumes. So he uses the absence of sound to kind of indicate slowdown, a slow motion effect where all of a sudden, okay, we're not focused on the action anymore, we're focused on the character and how they're feeling. And then the moment time kind of speeds up again, kind of like after bullet time has ended, and you can see there's a lot more motion going on with Genos, the sound effects immediately resume. And you can see it again here as we get down with the next energy blast. And Murata is just generally very, very good, very, very apt at deciding not only when to show off by using incredibly clever sound effects and being a bit of a cheeky bastard, but also about when not to use them, when not to bring them out, when not to show off. I think I actually zoomed out by accident there. Okay. Weird app. Okay. So you can see here the moment where this is one of the other things I like. When Saitama is dashing behind Genos as Genos is lashing out with his leg, you can see the after image of Saitama. But something else you can see is that the sound effect is actually Genos is clipping over it, right? So the sound effect is kind of jutting out towards us, almost as though it's an angled bit of perspective, where he overlaps it and blocks out some of the writing, which again gives you the sense of physicality to the sound, like as though the sound is present as a physical entity in the world, and not just as an abstract concept that's painted on top of the world, but very much like literally as a part of the physical reality of the world. And you can see it again here. Something that Murata likes to play around with a lot is these transparent sound effects, where you get the impact of the sound effect, but not as a thing that's overlaid on the world, but as a thing that's sort of kind of hovering, almost ghost-like inside of it. And that's something I really like about Yusuke Murata. But the other thing I started thinking about, other than, holy shit, I love this sequence so much, this is so freaking cool, I wish I could draw like that, I also started thinking about some of the first comics that I ever loved, and I really, really, really did love, and still do love. And they are by Keno Don Rosa, who's an American cartoonist, but who mostly did a bunch of European Disney comics, focused on some of the classic Duck characters. Essentially, if you watch DuckTales, you'll know the cast of characters: Huey, Dewey, Louie, Donald, Uncle Scrooge, Magic at a Spell, and their adventures. And he was one of the first cartoonists I sort of really... the first time I realized that a cartoonist is an individual artist, and that cartoons don't just kind of fall out of a publishing house, fully formed, because someone made them on an assembly line. The first time I realized that there was an artist behind it was when I read Keno Don Rosa's comics, and I started to be able to identify him and his particular style. But one of the other things that he influenced me in as a cartoonist, and again, it does this weird thing, is the way that he uses sound effects. Now, this is somewhat more basic than Murata particularly does it, but you can kind of see here how he, too, kind of tries to use the sound effect as a diegetic part of the world. He kind of... These squiggly lines are kind of the visual effect of the alarm that Donald has just set off. But inside that, he's also doing all these weird, wobbly, differently shaped letters that kind of indicate the texture, the shape of the sound. And that's, like I said, it's much more basic. Like, this is the kind of thing that you'll often see in Western comics as kind of a basic part of it. But for me, this was the first time I really realized that that was something you could do. And you can see it here again also, as Donald is... This, by the way, is a comic called Dream of a Lifetime by Don Rosa, where the Beagle Boys are attempting to infiltrate Scrooge's brain in order to steal some secrets from him. And they do this by infiltrating his dreams by way of a special device that let him enter the dreams, and they can manipulate the dreams in order by being aware that a dream is what's going on. And in the end, of course, Donald has to go into Uncle Scrooge's mind in order to get them out. Anyway, all of this is to say, if you read this comic, you might get a pretty good idea of where Christopher Nolan got the idea for Inception. I'm just saying. See here, as the machine gets turned on, we have this comedy moment where Donald is kind of like, hey, how would you like to click? And again, this was kind of the first time that I'd realized that, oh, wait, you can actually, you can let the sound effect overlap with text and become sort of part of the punchline, certainly, but also give this sort of sense of cinematic sound editing. Like, because this is the kind of thing you'd see in a comedy show, right? That a person is yelling, and then you hear the click, and then right? That sounds overlap each other as a part of a comic effect. But in terms of figuring out how to visualize that kind of thing, I'd never thought of it until I saw this particular type of comic. And really, I'm just using this as an excuse to gush about Don Rosa, because he really is one of my absolute favorite cartoonists. He's absolutely brilliant. But something else Don Rosa was quite apt at, like Murata, he's also very good at knowing when not to make a sound effect. Here we have Uncle Scrooge in his younger days, when he was a traveling cattle rustler. Who was trying to sell some cattle in Java right before the explosion of the volcano. Anyway, that's decidedly incidental. Anyway, he's taking a car into town in order to stop some bad guys, and the car itself is making plenty of noise. This is a very early car invented by Gyro Gearloose's grandfather, Ratchet Gearloose. Vroom, vroom. You can see the car is making plenty of noise, but even as he starts this massive animal stampede, he lets it be completely silent. Like, there's so many opportunities to do all kinds of things with sound effects right here. But Don Rosa knows that it's actually kind of funnier if you don't make noises. Like, if you don't do kaboom, pow, scream, all that noise, but you just let the image silently speak for itself. And this, I mean, it genuinely is a lot more funny this way. It's almost like you're kind of looking out at a silent tableau as audience members watching some kind of a show. And I quite enjoy it. And you can see he does it again here. Like, there's so many opportunities to do all kinds of noise, but he really just lets the car do the room noise and the environment do whatever the hell else it wants to do. Okay, this app I'm using to view images with is not quite doing as I want it to be. And you can see he does this very consciously again here, like very specifically choosing not to go splash, 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 but just letting the image silently speak for itself. And that discipline, that tension between, like, when do you show a sound effect and when do you not show it, and when do you use it, is something I had never considered or learned before reading these comics. I also particularly like this one. This is the Black Knight, Glorps again, I think, where this is a French thief who has managed to steal a suit of armor coated in a coating of science material that can dissolve anything it touches. So he uses that armor to basically cut around and dissolve things. And so Donald gets put on this ladder in Uncle Scrooge's money bin, and as it starts swinging around, twang, 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 bang, boing, ting, boing, bang. And that, I remember as a kid just laughing my ass off because of this, because when I read this panel, when I looked at it, I could so clearly hear those cartoon sound effects in my mind. It was so vivid to me, the way that Donald is being kind of thrown around madly until he finally gets deposited on the ground. And that's, I remember just laughing my ass off about this, because the image that this, like the sound, the sensation that this image conjured in my head was so vivid and so real. Let's see. What was my... Oh, yeah, right. Another thing Rosa is very, very fond of, when he wants a joke to land that is clearly auditory, right? He lets silence ring. All he does here, as Scrooge is slapping Donald on the back, all he does is just slap, and then he lets his illustration essentially conduce the sound, because I look at this image right here, and even though there is no sound effect to tell me what it sounds like, I can imagine it vividly in my head, because he's gone so overboard. He's gone so exaggerated on exactly how that thing just kind of splurts out and how the coffee goes splash in Donald's face. And he sets it up beautifully by just doing this little tender sip with one hand and the pinky out in this panel, and then he pays it off brilliantly by just giving us the slap and letting the visuals inform how the sound is supposed to emanate in our heads on the other. Okay, I think I finally figured out how this damn app works. And it's the same thing here, as this is after the volcano has exploded in Java and red-hot lava rocks are falling down from the sky. It's Krakatoa. You can see here again, it would be obvious to just go splash, 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 splash. Lots and lots and lots of splashes, but he just does a few in this panel right here. And then having established that we know, okay, when the rocks hit the water, it says splash, he doesn't bother anymore. Even in this giant panel, he just lets that set up. He just sets up this sound for us and lets the reader carry it through to the other panels. He lets us remember that that's what they sound like, so he doesn't need to reestablish it over and over again, which again is a lesson that was really valuable to me as a young cartoonist, that I can trust the reader. I can tell you, okay, this is what it sounds like when rocks fall into water one time, and you will remember it, and I don't need to set it up again and again and again and again and tell you over and over. I can just let the panel speak for itself. And that's something that he does, again, here. Where you can see Scrooge does this. The Black Knight is right outside the door. Scrooge has run out of ways to try and stop him. And finally he realizes, wait a minute, if I can make him topple over, he will fall forever. He falls onto a mound of diamonds. He's fine. He's not dead. But the thing that caught me about this panel when I read it as a child is that the moment I saw this ridiculous, dancing leg animation drawing at the end of Scrooge doing this ruck pull, is that I could clearly hear in my mind that cartoon sound, that slide whistle kind of, and then the tappity tap of someone trying to do tap dancing in a Scooby-Doo cartoon, whoop, as he spins around and then falls down. And notice just how silent, really, everything that's going on here is. How few sound effects Don Rosa really uses, because he's confident enough that the way in which he illustrates these things will give you the sound effect in your head. Like, he's relying on you as a reader to have watched cartoons, to be literate in what does a cartoon sound like. What does it sound like when a character does this ridiculous legs dance and then falls over on their butt? And for me, that was something I'd never thought about it. It had never really occurred to me that you can use sound effects in collaboration with the audience. And that's the clever thing that Murata is also doing. Like, he's using sound effects in collaboration with you. He's trusting you to know that after all of this sound and fury, tons of sound effects, when you get this silent panel, you're supposed to make the sound go away in your head as well. You're supposed to let the moment go silent just for a second and sit in this space of an instant and absorb this moment as though there was no sound going on at all. And then the sound resumes. And then the moment he needs you to let the scene go quiet again, he trusts you. He trusts that you understand that when all the sound effects fall away and the scene looks quiet, and he also achieves this with just having the floating rocks kind of hanging in space around Genus's head, he trusts that you know what he means by that. Because it would be, I've seen cartoonists do this before, also like Eastern cartoonists in manga, literally put a sound effect on the screen that says silence. Because they're so desperate to make the reader understand, no, in this moment you're supposed to imagine silence. Murata manages it just by sheer force of cinematic storytelling, essentially, like of using sound effects so excessively for so long, and then suddenly making them go away, and understanding that the reader will know it. And it's exactly the same principle that Don Rosa employs when he has this mad scene of animal carnage just blasting through a town, and he leaves it completely silent. Not a single sound effect. Nothing to tell you how to think about what this sounds like. You fill it in yourself. He's working with you as the reader in order to build the feeling and the emotion and the sensation of the scene. And that's pretty bloody impressive, if you ask me. Anyway, I saw the strip panel naked episode, and I just want it's set my head kind of on fire a little bit, and I really needed to talk about this. So thank you very much to Haas over on Straight Panel Naked for making the episode, for inspiring me. I wanted to shout him out since his episode is so strongly inspiring mine. Link to that one down in the description. You should really go subscribe to Strip Panel Naked. They have so many interesting videos about the art of making comics. And yeah, I think I'm done for this video. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, you can click the like button down below. That's what it's there for. And it also, you know, YouTube algorithm and all that stuff. I don't understand it, but it's apparently mandatory. And if I don't do it, then everybody goes away and I die alone. I'm not sure exactly how it's supposed to work. If you're not so inclined to like the video, that is, of course, completely okay as well. You can comment if you want to. If you want to hit the dislike button, I mean, you can, but I've rigged up some coding so that when you hit the dislike button, you're going to get like a giant, you know, cartoon boxing glove just come out of your screen and punch you right in the face. And it's going to make a very hilarious sound effect, which is going to hang out over your head, just kind of hang there forever as a mark of shame because you clicked the dislike button. And I mean, you don't want that, right? So think carefully. Anyway, if you are so inclined, I do have a Patreon that you can, if you have an extra $1 that you don't need in a month, it can really help me out. Like, because even $1 can actually genuinely sometimes make the difference between me eating pasta and eating actual food. So if you have that, that's completely, I would love it. But if you don't want to, that's completely fine. I'm kind of all out of sorts here because it's been a while since I've done a video, and I got a burst of inspiration from watching that Strip Panel Naked video, and I wanted to capitalize on it because I've been in, as you may have known from watching my last video, in a bit of a funk recently. So it was nice to just be able to do a video again. That was nice. I like that. Hi, my name is TV's Guy, and I like making videos. It's nice to do it again. Anyway, thank you very much for watching.